I've been very suspect of the claims that Todd's made of Bigfoot's existence, but Dr. Meldrum seems to have proof that an unidentified creature could be out there.
1,000 footprints, dozens of shaky videos, and a silence so loud, it's deafening. Bigfoot wasn't just hidden.
So a few years ago, he had recorded a sound that could possibly be a Sasquatch sound.
Yes.
He was buried beneath decades of lies, fear, and government cover-ups. Now, the truth is clawing its way to the surface, but it's not comforting. It's terrifying. Why? Stick around, because what's coming isn't just a revelation. It's a reckoning that will change everything you thought you knew about the world.
Here's the sound I heard.
Sasquatch in HD. There's one name that always sparks fire in Bigfoot debates: Todd Standing. He's not just another hiker with a blurry camera. He's the man behind the most crystal-clear footage of alleged Sasquatches ever recorded. The clips, known as Jake and Jane, didn't just stir conversation, they shook the entire Bigfoot community to its core. These weren't shadows in the woods or silhouettes in the mist. These were full, high-definition portraits of creatures staring directly into the lens. In a world flooded with grainy Bigfoot footage, Standing's clips looked too perfect. Jake, the male, appears with thick facial muscles, blinking eyes, and a towering frame. Jane, the female, has distinct brow ridges, flowing hair, and subtle facial twitches. Each frame was steady, clear, and uncannily detailed. That clarity became the very reason many dismissed it. Skeptics didn't waste time. Some labeled it a hoax instantly, arguing that it's just too clear to be real. They questioned why someone would suddenly capture high-resolution footage when decades of searching led to shaky blobs and shadows. Scientists and mainstream researchers leaned heavily on this argument, refusing to look deeper. The clearer the footage, the louder the disbelief. It became a paradox. Clarity, instead of proof, became the reason to doubt. But the story doesn't end with YouTube critics. Several forensic animators took a closer look and were startled. The way the facial muscles moved, the blinking patterns and skin texture didn't align with animatronics or known prosthetics. Wildlife biologists also noticed things that stood out. Eye spacing too wide for a human, nasal bone structures unfamiliar in hominids. Anthropologists pointed out the jaw width and cheek depth, features that didn't line up with any known species. It wasn't just impressive, it was anatomically confounding. This led to a small group of independent analysts who wanted answers beyond opinion. They turned to digital photogrammetry, a method that reconstructs 3D models from 2D images. By applying this technique to both Jake and Jane, they calculated estimated skull dimensions and head ratios. The results were shocking. The cranial width, orbital spacing, and maxilla length were outside the human range entirely. And yet, the proportions followed a kind of natural symmetry not typically found in fakes. What made this even more important was the size comparison. Using conifer needles in the foreground as fixed-size reference points, experts estimated Jake's head to be at least 15 inches wide. That's more than double the human average. The eyes, spaced farther apart than any recorded human, could not be duplicated by simply wearing a mask. In fact, the space between them alone was nearly the size of a human hand. The skull wasn't just large, it was a different shape altogether. Another overlooked detail is the hair movement. In the clips, there are slight breezes pushing the facial hair back and forth naturally. Animatronics rarely allow for that subtle movement, especially around delicate areas like the eyes. The skin around the eyelids also creases and compresses in a way that's nearly impossible to simulate with practical effects. These aren't things you notice right away, but they matter. Because those tiny motions are what make a face feel alive. Even makeup artists in the industry weighed in. Some noted that the blinking in Jane's video, especially the way her upper lid folds, would require a highly complex mechanical system. Yet no visible seams or power lines are present. No sound of servos. Nothing pointing to robotics. This added another layer of mystery. How could something so clean exist without invisible technology? Another twist is that these videos weren't made in a Hollywood studio. They were captured deep in the wild, remote areas in British Columbia, days away from the nearest road. Hauling prosthetics, lighting, and equipment into that kind of wilderness would have been a massive production. But there was no team, no trailers, and no studio budgets. Just one man with a camera and a story no one believed. They said it's Todd in a mask, until forensic video analysis revealed a head size no human could ever match. The mask accusation. One of the loudest claims surrounding Todd Standing's Bigfoot footage is that Jake, the creature seen in close-up HD, is actually Todd himself wearing prosthetics. This accusation has spread widely online, especially through viral side-by-side images showing Jake's face next to Todd's. Some people say the mouth, eyes, and nose are too close together. Some even say that software that recognizes faces can tell when two people look a lot alike. At first look, the comparison seems clear to many. But there is a problem with the side-by-side method. Face traits alone aren't enough to prove who someone is, especially when lighting, angles, and camera lenses change the way things look. Our brains are wired to look for trends, even when they don't exist. That's why some people see faces in clouds or toast that's been burned. A face looking similar doesn't mean anything without exact measures. Todd Standing replied by pointing out something that had been missed. Douglas fir needles in the background of the video. You can tell what size these needles are because they come from a tree that grows in British Columbia. They are about 1.25 inches long. Fir needles don't change size based on age or place like leaves or twigs do. Because they are always the same, they can be used to figure out the scale of movies. In his video, Standing used these needles as real-life measuring sticks. A technique he used is known as photogrammetry. With this method, you can measure unknown things in a video by using known reference objects. He found the pixel-to-inch ratio by comparing the sizes of the fir needles that were close to Jake's head. He used this to figure out that Jake's head was about 15 inches wide. The normal human head is about 6 to 7 inches wide, so that's more than twice as wide. To back it up, independent researchers tested the same approach using frame captures from the video. They placed digital rulers over the needle clusters and cross-referenced the distance across Jake's face. The numbers stayed consistent, 14.5 to 15 inches in every model. No human actor could wear a mask that doubles their head size without looking obviously fake or misshapen. This evidence hit at the core of the Todd in a mask theory. Another key point is head shape. Jake's head isn't just wide, it's shaped differently. The brow ridge is heavy, the orbital spacing is extreme, and the maxilla, upper jaw, is more pronounced than any modern human. The distance between the eyes is especially unusual. On close inspection, it's clear that a person's eyes wouldn't be able to see out of those sockets, even with prosthetics. Mask designers often use eye holes and mesh to help actors see through latex. The needle test. The second face in Todd Standing's footage, nicknamed Jane, has stirred just as much debate as Jake. Jane appears in a separate HD clip, filmed in a dense forest setting. Her expression is calm but focused, almost aware of the camera. Her facial structure looks different than Jake's, less wide, more oval-shaped, and with smoother features. Still, just like Jake, Jane's size makes one thing clear. She's not shaped like any human. To prove it, the same method used with fir needles on Jake was repeated, only this time with Engelmann spruce. This tree species grows across the same region where Jane was filmed. Like Douglas fir, its needles are remarkably consistent in length, averaging around 1.1 inches. Scientists and outdoorsmen alike rely on these needles for size estimates in nature studies. Since the needles are clearly visible in Jane's background, they provide a natural frame of reference. Using high-resolution frames from the video, analysts placed digital rulers along the visible needle clusters near Jane's head. By comparing pixel ratios, they calculated that her head spans at least 13 inches across at the cheekbones. That's wider than any known female human skull, and far outside the range of standard headgear. Even for men, a 13-inch width would require a custom helmet. If this were a costume, it would have to be massive and somehow still show no folds, seams, or distortions. To test this visually, researchers created a selfie-scale comparison using real human photos and overlaid transparent rulers. A human adult's head almost never exceeds 6.5 inches in width, even in close-up. Placing Jane's head beside these examples shows just how dramatically different her proportions are. She doesn't look a little bigger. She looks like another species entirely. And yet her face shows something more advanced than just shape, movement. That's where critics push back. A popular counter-argument is that Jane could be a puppet or animatronic head built to simulate expression. After all, Hollywood has been making realistic creatures for decades. But those effects are built on controlled sets, not in the wild. And even top-tier movie puppets from the early 2000s couldn't perform the subtleties seen in the Jane clip. When slowed down frame by frame, Jane's facial features don't just move, they shift with tension. Her lower jaw doesn't simply open and close, it vibrates slightly, showing signs of muscle tremor. There's an uneven pull at the corner of her mouth, like the beginnings of a snarl or a cautious breath. Her eyelids don't blink all at once either. They move in microseconds of delay between upper and lower lids. Something no puppet or servo motor from that time could replicate reliably without digital enhancement. Special effects expert Bill Munns, known for his forensic work on primate anatomy and film costumes, once noted how impossible it would have been to recreate muscle fluttering without computer-generated imagery. But Jane's clip doesn't show signs of CGI layering. The light reflects evenly across her skin, shadows fall naturally, and no edges blur or pixelate around movements, common indicators of digital tampering. The tremor in her jawline and the pulse in her temple come from something real, not programmed. Even more compelling is the blink rate. Jane blinks roughly every 3.8 seconds in the footage, which is slightly slower than the average human rate, but well within range for higher primates under low stimulus conditions. More interestingly, motion analysis software has detected contractions in the orbicularis oculi muscles, the muscles responsible for controlling blink speed, lid tension, and subtle squinting. These are incredibly hard to fake. They happen under the skin, not just on its surface. The software used for this test was developed for sports medicine, tracking micro movements in facial expressions for concussion studies. It picked up twitch patterns around Jane's eyes that aligned with how sentient mammals scan environments. These twitches weren't mechanical. They had irregularity, asymmetry, and depth. One contraction in her left brow even spiked milliseconds before her eye closed, showing reactive motion, not preset animation. That's a huge detail. For animatronics to pull this off in 2004 or 2005, it would have required not just robotics, but a hidden power source, precise programming, and skin material that flexes exactly like muscle. Nothing like that was on the market for field use, and nothing available would survive the cold or the moisture of a forest without glitching or breaking down. The Jane clip doesn't show sparks or failure. It shows muscle and reaction. Even her eye shine changes as the camera angle shifts. Her pupils reflect natural light differently with each frame, adjusting like a real creature adjusting focus. Her corneas glisten and track movement slightly off-screen. That's not programming. That's environmental awareness. If Jane is a puppet, she's the most advanced, untraceable puppet ever made. And no one has claimed to build her. Not Todd, not any artist, not any company. The evidence doesn't point to a human behind a mask or a puppet with blinking eyes. It points to a biological entity moving with reflexes and facial behavior too advanced for technology available at the time. Jane's head size, blink speed, muscle tension, and light response show traits found in living beings, not film props. If the mask theory collapsed under Jake, it's completely buried under Jane. Whatever she is, she's not made of latex. He came to destroy Todd's claims, but left questioning everything. One interview flipped a skeptic's doubt into silent belief. The interview that changed everything. In 2024, a filmmaker named Robert, known in documentary circles for exposing frauds and hoaxes, decided to investigate the most infamous Bigfoot case of all, Todd Standing's. He wasn't a believer. In fact, he'd spent years tearing apart wild claims, tracing hoaxes to their creators, and turning legends into facts. But what happened in the mountains of British Columbia that spring changed the course of his investigation. Robert had his own close encounter, an unexplained silhouette watching him from the ridge, staying just long enough to imprint doubt. What followed was a shift in direction. Robert didn't just want answers from pixels or hearsay. He wanted them straight from the source. He arranged a face-to-face interview with Todd Standing, choosing a remote location in Alberta with minimal distractions. It was just 2 chairs, 1 camera, and a list of accusations stretching back nearly 2 decades. Robert began the conversation with a brutal lineup of questions. Everything from Reddit rumors to mainstream media attacks was placed on the table. The prosthetic theory, the fake footprints, the alleged refusal to take polygraph tests, none of it was left out. Each point was fired off in quick order, and Todd didn't flinch. He answered every claim with calm, deliberate precision, and backed each with documents, timestamps, and witness names. One of the biggest revelations came when Robert confronted him about the popular belief that Todd had refused lie detector tests. That rumor had circulated for years, but Todd calmly pulled out an old email chain and printed requests from 2014 and 2015, showing he had actively asked for a certified polygraph multiple times. The problem wasn't him refusing, it was the networks backing out when liability came into play. That completely flipped the narrative. Robert pushed further, challenging Todd about camera placement, editing choices, and why he never turned over raw footage to independent labs. Todd responded with technical detail, discussing insurance issues, copyright control, and equipment logs. Most of it checked out, or at the very least had consistent logic. There was no stalling or dodging, just long explanations that were either incredibly well rehearsed or entirely true. What stood out wasn't the answers, it was the demeanor. Todd didn't act like a man trying to sell a story. He looked more like someone who'd grown tired of repeating himself. He had the posture of someone who'd been through years of public humiliation, constant internet attacks, and endless character assassinations, and was still standing, quietly defiant. At one point, Robert noted Todd's hands. They trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from tension. This was a man who had filmed something the world didn't believe, and because of it, he'd been labeled everything from a con artist to a madman. He'd lost funding, credibility, and even friends over what some called a hoax. As the hours went on, the mood shifted. Robert had come in ready to dismantle every part of the story. But now, he was looking at a man who didn't fold under pressure. Someone who'd taken the worst public backlash possible and hadn't cracked. Robert didn't start believing right away, but he felt something else, doubt. Not in Todd, but in the narrative that had been built around him. The most powerful moment came when Todd talked about being isolated by the scientific community. He'd tried working with academics. He'd invited biologists, anthropologists, and university researchers to his sites. Most declined. Some arrived, saw too much, and never returned. Others dismissed it all without review. Todd described this as the most painful part. Not being called a liar, but being completely ignored by those who claim to seek the truth. Robert left that interview shaken, not because of any specific fact, but because of the man himself. Todd didn't look like a fraud. He looked like someone who had seen something impossible and had paid the price for it. That kind of wear shows in the eyes. It wasn't excitement or fear. It was fatigue, a weight too heavy to fake. After that day, Robert's project changed tone. He stopped trying to prove Todd wrong and started exploring how a society treats those who claim to have seen the unexplainable. He began reviewing older footage with fresh eyes. He pulled back from attack forums and spent more time studying terrain, animal behaviors, and native legends in the areas Todd filmed. The data didn't hand him an answer, but it removed one thing: certainty. The final footage of the interview never aired in full. Only portions made it into Robert's documentary, titled Proof or Punishment. But behind the scenes, the full conversation sparked new discussion. New scientists stepped in. A motion lab offered to test Jake and Jane's muscle tremors again. Suddenly, Todd wasn't just being laughed at, he was being listened to. What they don't want you to measure. Even with crystal clear footage, detailed measurements, and expert analyses, Todd Standing's videos remain widely rejected. The evidence isn't being ignored because it lacks quality, it's being rejected because it challenges a deeply rooted belief system. Most people don't want Bigfoot to be real. It disrupts science, history, and our understanding of the natural world. And that's where the problem begins. When something threatens a person's worldview, the brain often reacts by rejecting the information, no matter how solid it is. This is called cognitive dissonance. It creates an emotional discomfort when new facts don't match what someone already believes. So instead of questioning their beliefs, people attack the source. And Todd Standing has become the perfect target. Online, the backlash against his footage didn't grow from scientific reviews. It grew from social media. Within weeks of his videos going viral, a wave of disinformation followed. Doctored images began circulating, suggesting Jake and Jane were masks bought online. Sound bites were ripped out of interviews and re-edited to make Todd look evasive or confused. Even timestamps were altered to create the illusion of inconsistencies in the raw footage. Much of this came from organized efforts, not random users. Several so-called debunker communities coordinated smear campaigns across forums and YouTube, many of which refused to even watch the full footage. Screenshots were taken out of context, and technical explanations were ignored. Some creators built entire followings by mocking the footage without providing any real counter-analysis. It became a trend to discredit, not investigate. Behind the scenes, some of the loudest voices in the skeptic community were acting very differently. Two prominent debunkers, both with professional backgrounds in video analysis, were shown the raw footage privately. They spent hours reviewing it, frame by frame. Their conclusion? They couldn't explain it, but they had refused to go public with that information, worried it would damage their careers. This refusal to speak honestly isn't just about reputation. It reveals how fragile scientific trust becomes when tied to personal image. These were people who built their brands on disproving fringe claims. Admitting they couldn't debunk Standing's footage meant risking everything they had worked for. So they stayed silent, and the noise of misinformation carried on. Adding to the mystery, a recently declassified RCMP wildlife report from 2012 mentioned unexplained primate tracks in the same remote area where Todd filmed Jake. The report was part of an internal file labeled Unconfirmed Species Activity, and while it didn't mention Bigfoot directly, it listed track sizes, gait patterns, and migration behavior inconsistent with known animals in the region. One officer even noted that the stride spacing exceeds that of any known bear species. This wasn't a Reddit post. It was a government file, signed and time-stamped. Despite this, there was no follow-up from any official body. The report sat in archives until a Freedom of Information request unearthed it years later. And just like with Todd's footage, it was dismissed or buried. No agency investigated further. No press covered the story. The pattern is clear. Anytime something pushes too far beyond what's accepted, it doesn't get studied. It gets buried. Instead of curiosity, there's censorship. Instead of analysis, there's ridicule. It's easier to destroy the messenger than to rethink everything we think we know about the natural world. Bigfoot might not be a myth, just a truth buried so deep, even scientists are scared to touch it. The truth hurts. Todd Standing didn't just film something rare, he may have captured a piece of forbidden truth. His clearest footage of Bigfoot didn't spark worldwide study or funding. It sparked silence, denial, and personal destruction. He wasn't torn apart because his work lacked value, but because it held too much, and the system around him had no interest in accepting it. The Jake and Jane footage is still unmatched in the Bigfoot community. Every expert who's looked at it behind closed doors admits it goes beyond anything seen before. The facial movements, muscle twitching, and even blinking patterns all match living beings, not props or puppets. The size and proportions simply do not match any known primate, including humans. And most importantly, it all holds up under frame-by-frame digital analysis. Nothing in the footage has been debunked using science or technology. Critics haven't found inconsistencies in lighting, movement, or anatomy. And even with access to CGI tools, no one has recreated anything that comes close. That's because faking the micro-muscle movement captured in Jane's face wasn't even possible with early 2000s tech. The eyelid contractions alone would have required custom software animation far beyond consumer-grade effects of that era. What makes this all more disturbing is the off-record support from professionals. Forensic animators, motion scientists, and even ex-wildlife officers have privately stated their belief that the footage shows a real, living animal. But none have gone on record. Their careers, grants, and reputations are too valuable to risk over a creature that shouldn't exist. The fear isn't of Bigfoot, it's of public rejection. Meanwhile, skeptics still refuse to confirm what they can't disprove. Even those who admit the footage is bizarre stop short of calling it real. They shift the topic, question motives, or blame the editing process. But not one of them has shown evidence that proves the creatures were actors or models. Their silence says more than their words ever could. This brings us to a darker possibility, one that has grown louder over time. What if the footage isn't just real? What if it's already known to be real by people in power? A growing theory in cryptozoology suggests that government agencies may be aware of the existence of Sasquatch, but choose to suppress it. There are possible reasons why. One is ecological panic. If a new species of humanoid is confirmed, logging, construction, and land development would face enormous pushback. Another reason could be tied to indigenous land rights. Many sightings occur in or near native lands, and acknowledging a sentient, undiscovered being could legally strengthen native sovereignty in those areas. That would complicate resource access and political boundaries. There's also the issue of tourism and national park safety. Revealing a large, unclassified creature roaming through protected forests might scare off visitors. Lawsuits could follow. Insurance costs could spike. Some areas might become off-limits. And with billions tied to outdoor recreation, the stakes are massive. In 2018, an anonymous whistleblower who worked in U.S. forestry claimed their department had a quiet protocol for how to handle Bigfoot reports. According to them, rangers were told to downplay encounters and never escalate claims to federal wildlife databases. Whether this was a rogue policy or something higher up is unknown. But it suggests that denial may be deliberate, not accidental. Todd Standing may have walked straight into that wall. Not because he hoaxed anything, but because he showed something the system wanted buried. His footage wasn't ignored because it was fake. It was buried because it was too real, and admitting that would tear holes in too many stories. The quiet rejection wasn't just about him. It was a survival instinct of institutions that weren't ready to change. And this is where the truth really hurts. The mystery isn't whether Bigfoot exists. The evidence is already here, on camera, in pixels, in measurements, in witness testimonies, and in classified reports. The real lie may be that we were ever supposed to know, that we were ever supposed to see. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.